Hey guys, Eckhart here with episode 11 of Star Wars Starship Versus. It's really hard to believe that we've actually made it to 11 episodes in just under, I think it must be just under 2 weeks. So thanks to everyone who's watched so far, and as always, keep the suggestions coming. I know some of you guys get frustrated because it takes me a while to get through all of the suggestions in the comments. Well, I can only make one video a day, and all of you guys have really great ideas. If you want to check out one of the previous 10 videos, I'm going to put a link to the playlist in a pinned comment and also in the description. I'm working on a few fun videos for you guys for the coming days, including one of my most requested, the Munificent class Star Frigate versus the Dreadnought Heavy Cruiser. And today we're also going back to the Clone Wars with the Lucrehulk class Battleship versus the MC80 Home One class Star Cruiser. As always, we're going to be comparing these two ships based on three categories: firepower, defensive capabilities, and fighter support. But as always, this battle is going to the ship that is overall superior. So we're also going to be looking at intangibles, and even if a ship wins 2 or even 3 categories, doesn't necessarily mean that it wins overall. This is also a one-on-one battle, so each ship only gets to take with it what it would typically carry on board. And since we try to focus on the starships here, we're going to presume that each ship is captained by equally competent persons. I find this matchup interesting because both of these ships served as command ships for their respective factions. The Lucrehulk was 3 kilometers long and often was part of Confederacy blockades or battles. The large Confederate capital ship was actually a repurposed freighter, which was militarized for the Clone Wars. At over a kilometer long, the MC80 Home One type Star Cruiser was the most advanced ship used by the Rebel Alliance. Alright, so it's time to evaluate these ships head to head. We'll look first at the first category, firepower. The Lucrehulk Control Ship had very heavy weapons, as we can see in the Battle of Naboo. It has these very powerful quad turbo lasers. Now, there were various types of Lucrehulk control ships, from the standard droid control ship we see in the Battle of Naboo to the more advanced, much more heavily armed warships. And the armament on these ships can vary just as much as the class. The battleship has hundreds of turbo lasers as well as point defense weaponry, while the more standard droid control ship that we see in episode 1 only has about 50 of those quad turbo lasers. And this makes sense. As the Clone Wars continued to drag on, these ships were further militarized and more heavily armed. I've decided to go with the episode 1 version, the one with 50 turbo lasers, just because I think a fully armed Lucrehulk with hundreds of turbo lasers and a dedicated advanced point defense weapon systems would be very difficult to beat. So for its size, that ship is not particularly well armed. However, if we look at the MC80 Home One type, that ship as a kind of versatile command ship hybrid isn't particularly well armed either. The Home One relied more on its shielding, only sporting 36 turbo lasers and 36 ion cannons, not particularly impressive for a ship of its size. Still, it's more densely packed than the Lucrehulk is, and I think its ion cannons give it a bit of versatility. I think too, given that the ship is a lot more maneuverable, it can also hit the enemy ship in more interesting ways. So I'm going to give this category to the MC80. Alright, next is defensive capabilities, and you guys know just how much I love to talk about how great Mon Calamari shielding is. And really, the Home One type really exemplified the Mon Calamari's dedication to strong defensive systems, with both a very powerful hull and very competent shields. And really, especially with their redundant shielding, I'd put the Home One up against any Star Destroyer, and I think it could outlast it in a battle, which is probably why Admiral Ackbar chose that to be the command ship during the Battle of Endor. However, the Lucrehulk was no slouch on its own, and the Revenge of the Sith Incredibles cross-section guide said that it would take several Venators just to weaken the Lucrehulk's shields. Now, I wouldn't necessarily on its own take that as gospel, but several things that happened during the Battle of Naboo convinced me that these shields must be extraordinarily powerful. First, the N1 starfighter pilots realize that there's nothing they can do to actually damage the ship. And I mean, although they're not spouting a whole lot of firepower, they do have conventional weaponry and missiles. Second, the Trade Federation commanders do not seem scared at all that there's a battle going on, despite the fact that they're usually a little on the skittish side. And they even say, nothing can get through our hull. And the average Lucrehulk, which would have been created and upgraded after the Battle of Naboo, probably wouldn't have been vulnerable to a whole lot. So I'm tempted to call this category a tie, just because of how much I love Mon Calamari ships and Mon Calamari shielding. However, it's hard to ignore the fact that the Lucrehulk is essentially a space station, and it can take a whole lot of punishment with its extraordinarily thick hulls and very powerful shielding. So I give this category again to to the Trade Federation command ship. Alright, so finally we get to carrying capacity, and this one is interesting because the Lucrehulk has sheer numbers on its size, being that it's a freighter. It can carry over 1,500 droid starfighters. However, I'm really not impressed by what a droid starfighter offers. It's unshielded, it's not particularly maneuverable, and it's not really well armed. On the other hand, the MC80 Home One would have carried 120 starfighters, but these would have been Rebel A-Wings, B-Wings, X-Wings, and Y-Wings, all very advanced, very well armed, and shielded starfighters. Now we see again at the Battle of Naboo that a single N1 starfighter is much more effective than even several droid starfighters, and I'd say the N1 is a couple steps below most of these Rebel ships. But I will say much of this is movie magic, and the fact that you don't want to kill the good guys too often in a children's movie. So the question is really this: how many starfighters is one Rebel starfighter worth? And the answer has to be over 10 if we want the MC80 to come out ahead in this category, and I'm just not sure that that's really realistic. However, what kind of pulls me back to the Rebel side is that they have dedicated bombing crafts in both their Y-Wings and their B-Wings. Now, although these ships won't necessarily live too long in a one-on-one dogfight, they can do serious damage to an enemy capital ship. And since that's ultimately the goal here, I'm going to call this category a tie. So I'm going to skip the intangibles now and go straight into the battle. I'm going to talk through what I think would happen. A droid control ship is very, very difficult to destroy, and really, the Naboo fleet was only able to do so because they got very lucky and Anakin Skywalker was able to use the Force to guide him in his destruction of the ship. That being said, Bravo Flight, which is the name of the starfighter corps that we see at the end of episode 1, didn't seem to be comprised of more than, say, 20 or 30 fighters. And although these ships weren't really going to do any harm to the Lucrehulk, they at least survived for quite a while, and probably longer than you would expect. However, if these two ships randomly come across each other like they would in the scenario that we're looking at here, any captain of the MC80 is not going to know how to exploit the Lucrehulk's weak spot. And even if they do, they're probably going to have a very tough time flying a fighter into the hangar like Anakin did in episode 1. The MC80, of course, has the advantage of mobility. Again, the Lucrehulk is very slow, it probably won't be able to turn and face enemy ships very effectively. I think the best chance that the MC80 has is to get in a position where it can attack the core ship without taking too much damage, and the core ship is the bit in the middle. This part is less well armed and less well armored, and if they could destroy that, the rest of the ship would go down with it. But can they do it? That's the real question. We know that it's very, very difficult to pierce the shield and the hull of a Lucrehulk class. I think ultimately the Home One's best chance is to use a combination of its ion weapons and its fighters. The problem though is this: the Lucrehulk has 1,500 fighters on board, and we see during the Battle of Naboo that there's a ton of fighters out there, and then when they fly inside the hangar, there's a ton just sitting around doing nothing. I'm really not sure how the Home One, with only 36 laser cannons and only a few hundred starfighters, is going to be able to resist over 1,000 enemy ships, even if they are lightly armed. I'm sure that with time, the Mon Calamari ships, along with the X-Wings, the Y-Wings, and the B-Wings, would be able to eventually break the shields of the droid control ship. That is going to take a lot of time I just don't think that they have. I see the battle happening like this. The Mon Calamari ship jumps in and is unable to really focus on damaging the Trade Federation ship because it's overwhelmed by over 1,000 enemy starfighters. The Mon Calamari ship really wants to focus on the Trade Federation ship and pound away at their heavy shields, but they can't because each laser cannon is focused on repelling an enemy starfighter because they do not have dedicated point defense laser systems. Maybe some Y-Wings or B-Wings get through, but these are pretty slow ships, and I think that the enemy turbo lasers will be able to take them out. Ultimately, there are just too many Vulture droids, too many droid starfighters for the Mon Calamari to handle. I mean, 1,500 is a whole lot. I mean, the bombs and the other weapons carried by the Rebels will be very useful, but I don't think that they'll be able to actually attack. They'll be too busy defending. So for that reason, I give this battle to the Trade Federation ship, and I think that it probably wins 7.5 times out of 10. If they had, say, 500 starfighters instead of 1,500, then I think this battle would pretty easily go to the Mon Calamari ship, just because the Trade Federation cruiser isn't well armed whatsoever. It's got a lot of weak spots, it's not great for angles, and it's not really mobile. The only thing it's got going for it is its shield and its carrying capacity. And in just a prolonged head-to-head engagement with no fighters, I think the MC80 would also come out on top, just because it's got better weapons and it could avoid enemy fire. But that's not what's going on here. We're looking at the two ships as they would ordinarily exist. So again, the Lucrehulk comes out on top 7.5 times out of 10. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. This was a really interesting matchup because we see two ships that fill kind of similar roles, but they do so in different ways. Also keep in mind that the Lucrehulk was a different ship throughout different points of history, and it was more well armed as the Clone Wars progressed. Anyways guys, did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Let me know down in the comments below, and of course, let me know which matchup you guys would like to see next time, and if you see one that you think looks really cool, make sure to give it a like. I'm slowly making it through the backlog of videos that I have to do, but if I see one I really like, I make sure that it gets done. Also, if you made it this far, leave a comment down below what you think a good name for a Lucrehulk class ship would be. You've just been given one by the Trade Federation, you're in full command, and you get to name it. What do you call it? Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. As always, may the Force be with you.